Welcome to the More Happiness, Less Suffering podcast. I'm Cayce Howe, Senior Meditation and Dharma Teacher for Inside LA.
And I'm Dr. Monisha Vasa, Psychiatrist. In our little podcasting studio in Orange County, California, we bring wisdom from the couch and the cushion to your real-life questions and struggles. So grab a cup of tea and join us. We're so glad you're here. So welcome back to the More Happiness, Less Suffering podcast. We're really glad to have you back with us. And today we are going to be talking about perspective, which I think is something that we all are challenged by or struggle with sometimes to maintain the type of perspective that perhaps serves us best, especially when faced with challenges. So as always, we're going to start with a poem, and this poem is a personal favorite. It's called The Guest House by Rumi, and I'll go ahead and read it. This being human is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Wonderful.
One of my favorites.
I was going to say oldie but goodie.
Yeah.
I guess super old. In a meditation sense, when I think about perspective, I think a lot about stillness and our inability to see the stillness. So this perspective between like stress and peace and calm and agitation, we could choose kind of by our attention what perspective we want to be looking at things, like this lens, if you will. And it's interesting to note that when we look out in the physical world, that a lot of times we don't see the space around even physical objects. And of course, there's a great analogy that's been used for a long, long time when looking at a picture or something that has a lot of space in it. And Chogyam Trungpa, great Tibetan master, used to do this a lot when he would show students a picture, and it would be a clear blue sky, like a beach day, and there'd be a bird, in that photo. And he would say, "What do you see?" And of course, everyone would say, "Oh, you see a bird," And he's like, "Well, yeah, but most of this, like 99% of this picture is space," And we're trained to see the bird, something physiological, biological. We're trained to see the bird. We're trained to see the objects in a room. We're not trained to see the space. And we're also not trained to see the stillness in things. Same thing, like the space and the stillness. If you think with our physical perspective, if you're looking out somewhere and it could be like this vast landscapes, kind of same situation, and it might look like nothing's there, but if something moves, then we're going to notice that. We're going to notice movement. Mm-hmm. So we notice movement, and we also notice objects. We notice movement, we notice objects. So it's like we see the contents of the space. We don't see the space. And with meditation or turning inward, we're trying to find this place of refuge within ourselves. We're looking to see that spaciousness, but excuse me. It's the same thing that happens when we close our eyes. We don't see the spaciousness, even though it's quite amazing. It's just absolutely fascinating when we turn inward there's really nothing but space. It's just incredible. And yet, what's even more incredible is we don't see it. We just see, oh my gosh, my mind's racing with thoughts. My mind, I mean, think about the mind, completely vast, this extremely vast, amazing mind that goes on infinitely. Yet we see the thoughts, we see sensations, we see beliefs, we see the daydreams, we see all the content, and it looks so busy. And again, going back to that movement or stillness, we don't see the stillness, we see the mind in movement. We don't see the observer that's quite still, watching this mind in movement. And we see all the contents all the time, coming and going. And in fact, we don't even see them going because there's so much to kind of witness. And I think the key is this perspective piece. It's kind of a trained thing, a learned thing that we need to pay attention to the spaciousness. And this is the whole practice, is pointing that out. Like, what am I when I'm not attached to my incessant thinking? Mm-hmm. And then when we turn inward on that, we recognize, wow, there's a lot of space here, and we start to move our attentional value. The lion's share of our attention can be moved more towards this appearance of space as opposed to the appearance of what's happening within that space. And one thing I was interested actually on this topic about asking you, like, as a psychiatrist, I'm sure you come upon this every single day of your practice, because I know for myself, I'm caught up in my own stories and what I see and what I think to be real and what I think like so-and-so said and how they meant it and all that stuff. So I could see when I watch my mind grab onto these very, what I consider concrete things, and I could see that my mind is absorbed in that instead of seeing the spaciousness around these things. What are some tools, techniques, advice that you give to your patients when they're kind of caught up in the contents and can't see the space of things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenge because, as you said, we all have had that experience of feeling caught up by those thoughts and emotions and sensations. And in fact, I think because that is what we're either wired to do or trained to do, and to instead see the stillness that is inherent or to see the spaciousness, we have to train ourselves to be able to shift our perspective in that way. But until we've been able to do that, in a sense, I feel like that stillness could be mistaken maybe for other things. Like, it could be mistaken for boredom. It could be mistaken for nothing's happening. It could be mistaken for lack of interesting or exciting things, to think about and reflect upon. So in a way, I think there's almost like this period of time where, as we're starting to notice that stillness and notice the space, that we actually have to discern, like, oh, this is spaciousness. This is not boredom, or this is not feeling lonely or whatever it may be, But I think it's sort of this ongoing question of how do we continue to work with seeing alternate perspectives, other than the one that we're perhaps most attached to, in the moment. And I can think of one patient in particular, this is related to the current COVID situation, and this person was a healthcare worker, and they were feeling really anxious about a call shift that they were going to have to take. It's probably about like 3 weeks away. And they were going through all the potential scenarios of what would happen if they were to get exposed to COVID during that call shift. And sort of not only if they were to get exposed, if they were to get sick, what would happen to their children, what would happen to their spouse, what would happen to their other patients, and really sort of like almost like a runaway train of like, what ifs, what if this, what if that. And so very much sort of caught in the anxiety and the fear of all of those potential scenarios. And, part of how we worked together was to pause and to even recognize or name that these are multiple potential scenarios that none of which are unfolding in the present moment. There's about 1,000 other things that could happen between now and 3 weeks from now. And even if you were to be exposed, about 1,000 things that could happen between that exposure and all those potential consequences. And so when you come back to, okay, well, what's actually true in the present moment? Like right here, right now, what do we know to be true? And none of that actually is what we know to be true, right? So, so it kind of connects us to a sense of the spaciousness that exists when we're fully present with what's true right now, which usually is not all of those thoughts and beliefs and emotions and opinions and sensations. It's not anything that's happened in the past. It's not anything that's going to happen in the future. And when we can really tune very, very specifically into the present moment, there is this infinite quality to it. I think a lot, for example, I've been trying to practice, and I think my morning practice, I try to have my coffee very mindfully, and you think about like when you really tune into all the sensations, if you're fully present with that cup of coffee, there really is an infinite quality. There's such a spaciousness to just that moment, because all the other stuff starts to fade into the background. And so that's one tool that we often use is like, well, when we're having all this anxiety about all these things that could happen, okay, but let's bring ourselves back to the here and now. What is the quality of this moment?
Yeah. And I think that the getting back and the awakening, like once we're here and we're unhooked, for me, this is where the beginning of the exploration begins, because we, like I mentioned, we're just so stuck all the time in our mental fabrications, and that we forget these other possibilities of awareness. So this entertaining of different levels of awareness. We have our emotional body. We have our mental body. We have obviously the physical body. We have kind of these spiritual realms, and we can connect to different things. We could, connect to different pieces of ourselves, and then, even spiritually speaking, and we can actually become different flavors, like different personalities. We have different personalities. We could see ourselves go through these different personalities. We could even take on different group consciousness. When we're in different groups, we actually act a different way.
Yeah.
If you're with your immediate family, and then you go into a group of your hobbyists, and you're within that hobby, you have a different consciousness, and you see things in a different way. You could even maybe notice yourself in certain situations thinking a little bit different when you're in a certain group of people. When we're in different environments, as far as like nature environments, some nature environments are very, very spacious, but energetically very peaceful, very calm, and we could see through that perspective. If we sit in nature, maybe meditate in nature, you will see, I know it sounds very airy-fairy, but if you sit with a tree, actually if you meditate on a tree, you meditate on a stone, you meditate on a bush, you meditate on the sky, there's certain attributes of those different things that we could literally merge with. We could become the log energetically. We could feel this. And then behind, in the backdrop of all those different experiences, there's this underlying consciousness, this underlying non-state, this underlying thing that all of those different personalities, different energies, different perspectives are arising within. As soon as we become awake, we could also tap in to, maybe we can call this the ultimate perspective. It's a non-perspective. There's no center here. There's no subject, no object. There's no self and other. There's no duality, right? And I think ultimately, in meditation practice, when we get to this place of maybe pure beingness, or also like non-being. There's no one being. There's no one doing anything. And this doesn't have to happen in this very deep meditation and all this stuff. It could happen very easily, very simply in this moment. Like when you wake up, like you mentioned, just coming back to the now. If we investigate what brings us back to the now, what awareness brings us back to the now? What awareness is even still aware of the chaos? And we can investigate the qualities of that very, very, very base level, essence level wakefulness. What is that quality? And in the end, when we start investigating the quality of this pure essence awareness, this is where there's a lot of fruition of the relief of suffering, the release of grasping, the release of needing things to be, a certain way, the release of me and mine, and all of the struggle that comes with protecting the me, protecting the mine, all the possessiveness. The root of all of that gets cut when we start to tap in on a very deep level to that. And I say a deep level, it's just a matter of perspective. It's deep in that it's the negation of everything that we're taught and every habit that we have. It's deep in that sense. It's deep because it's this surrender that we've never even felt possible. It's this absolute surrender where there's literally nothing. It's a goalless deal. It's absolute nothingness. In that, there's so much. There's everything is in that.
It's tricky because I think when we, like the times that we've taught together, for example, that's a concept that oftentimes I think many people have never even been exposed to, this idea that there is a watcher, and this idea of that there really is no, I'm me and you're you, self and other, that I think in some ways, part of the reason it feels like such a profound shift is because for many of us, we haven't even heard that, we don't even know that we can shift our perspective in that way. And so, I think when we perhaps hear that or come upon that, there's almost like this period of like, wow, like I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah. And, yeah, exactly. our entire society is not coming from that perspective.
Right.
For sure. And even the words that we use, like where, there's an observer of all these things, that's just a word. That's not true either. There's technically not an observer either, but it's a great stepping stone, a neutral observer, just watching things come and go. That's cool. We can start there. And, if you are hearing this for the first time, just, infinite patience and patience and understanding. And I think it's an interesting, we talk about a paradox a lot because the paradox is that we get there by non-striving and not thinking about it. But me too. I was just thinking about it, mulling it over, contemplating it. And, I know all my teachers were saying, no, you can't figure it out. It's just more of an experience and to keep going with your meditation practice. And that's the most important piece is the experiential taste of these things. Always take a meditation technique or whatever you're hearing, these things, and try them on in the silence of your own being. Don't mull it over and read another book and listen to another darn podcast. these are all invitations for your own personal experience. As a teenager, I would read a little book from mostly like the Hindu yogis would spell out these techniques, and I never wanted the long explanations. I was just like, give me the quick technique. I'm going to go meditate. Like, probably I was like on the opposite end. I probably should have like learned more, right? I didn't care. I was just like, I just want to sit. I just want to figure it out myself. And but I think as I go along, actually, I think that's the better approach than learning and learning and learning and listening and listening. It's like, all right, enough of that.
Let's practice.
Let's practice and try it on for yourself and trust yourself. Like you're a Buddha, like you're it. You're already are what you're seeking, and trust in that. So maybe let's move into a bit of a practice. We always end with a short meditation. And if you could join us, like always, just if you're driving, then don't close your eyes. And but no matter where you are, of course, you could just listen and allow the words to just move through you as needed. And so allowing your eyes to close if you like, if you can. And then paying attention to attention, paying attention to the part of your beingness that knows that you're here. And like we mentioned in the beginning, notice that this awareness is quite intrigued with movement. When something moves in the mind, it's almost like noticing a fish underwater. The mind automatically catches it. It notices it. And then it wants to follow it. It gets hooked. And by simply recognizing this process, see if anything changes. Minding the mind, maybe without any goal, just investigating and staying curious on how the mind works. When is it present? How does it get caught in thoughts? Notice when it awakens. And then noticing how long it stays. Stays in the moment. Paying attention to sound, sensations, the breath. Thoughts, emotions. And notice the noticer, the watcher. And allowing yourself to marinate for a few moments in this neutral observer, that which notices all phenomena, all sounds, sensations, beliefs, concepts, daydreams. That which is watching all of them come and go, like clouds arising, abiding, and falling away. Marinating in awareness itself. And just wishing that all beings everywhere can feel that spaciousness. They could tap into that awareness where everything's at ease. May all beings, myself included, be happy and free from suffering.